I always start off doing light lines that are fairly visible. I begin to lay out areas of the figure that help center the main parts. I break things down into essential shapes, but the light lines really is an integral step because it allows me to make changes, and I'm making assessments as I'm drawing. You can see in the shoulder area I went a little too far, so I brought some of the lighter lines in, and I only begin to darken in the lines when I feel comfortable that the proportions are correct, the perspective is correct. But the vast majority of my assessment of the figure and analysis of the figure is done during the light line period, and I'm essentially just tracing the light lines that I've laid out for myself. And I vary the line weight. You can see areas, especially in the corners or where the line curves, things are darker. I normally tend to darken in the areas and vary the line weight in the corners because I feel that people can't necessarily close in the corners with their mind, but straighter lines tend to be a little bit lighter. People have a capacity to close in some of these areas, and you always need some type of variation in the line weight with any drawing. It is just the nature of all objects. There are stronger lines that are more prominent with every object, and there are lines based on the contrast behind whatever might be on an object that might not be as visible. So we want to mimic that by varying the line weight in any drawing that we do. I'm beginning to lay out the shading in the tonal areas that are the darkest, and tone is incredibly important in shading. Tone essentially is the darkest area of the object. If you were to shade an area of the object, one side of that object is usually much darker, and I'm not talking about the shading that details specific textures, but I'm talking about the shading that really overall brings volume to the object. Tone is incredibly important shading, so you can see the lower portion, and on the right side of the drawing there is a darker area, and so I'm really sort of focusing on that tone. And that's what gives the object or the figure its volume and three-dimensionality. And then once I sort of lay out the areas of shade, I begin to intensify, and I'm always layering the shade as opposed to me going in, starting off really dark in one area and then moving on to the next. I'm sort of shading in layers and building up the contrast. I'll go back in sometimes and intensify some of the lines and really vary the line weight a bit more. It does help enhance the intensity of the object and allows that object to feel a lot more three-dimensional. Not every drawing feels completed. Oftentimes I stop too early, or I've overworked a drawing, but you sort of have to make that judgment for yourself as to exactly what works best.